Afternoon. In my last talk with you, I gave you a very brief plot summary of what happens in Book 2 of Gulliver's Travels, which Jonathan Swift titled as A Voyage to Brobdingnag. In today's talk, we will be taking the earlier talk a bit further and try and reconstruct what Jonathan Swift might have meant or what that second book actually implies to us today when we read that text critically. Now, as you have known in my last talk with you with regard to Book 2, Gulliver is now in a kingdom, an island, where people are, unlike in Lilliput, much larger than him in size. So an obvious difference is physically apparent, and that is a difference in the size between Gulliver and his hosts. Here, Gulliver discovers what it feels like to be in the position of the Lilliputians and forced to rely on the goodwill of others, physically far superior to oneself. Sorry. This leaves him perpetually fearful for his physical well being, and he is often in a state of considerable anxiety about his safety during his stay here among a nation of giants for whom he is no more than maybe a living doll or a curiosity. He is at the mercy of whatever or whoever is keeping him, and he discovers this when his original keeper turns him into an equivalent of a circus item in order to make money out of him, traveling from town to town to put him on display, asking him to do acts which perhaps tired him to death or threatened to tire him to death rather. Now, this book can be considered at an immediate level as a parody of some form of multiculturalism, whereby Gulliver is made to perform things while being observed by the others as if he were a museum exhibit rather than a living being. To the locals, his hosts, his ways are quaint, strange, laughable, comic, and they are unable to relate to him on a personal level as a creature like themselves. The discrepancy in size merely magnifies the cultural differences between Gulliver on one hand and his hosts on the other, which neither can overcome. And Gulliver, we find in this book, is repeatedly brought to some form of a complete mental breakdown, as it were, because of the physical demands made on him by his keeper and the customers that he attracts, or rather his size attracts. His keeper's reaction to his declining health is to work Gulliver further hard, exploiting him to the full, while he can, on the assumption that he will soon die. There are a few exceptions, of course, to this somewhat callous attitude among the Brobdingnagians. In particular, his minder, who is named Glumdalclich, the daughter of the family where he first finds refuge. She remains caring and affectionate towards Gulliver all the while he is in her charge, but this does not save him from the maltreatment from jealous individuals while they are both resident at court. For example, we have an evidence of the Queen's dwarf who takes a strong dislike to Gulliver because he finds in Gulliver a competition for the affection or attention of the Queen. And at one point, even tries to drown Gulliver by dropping him into a large bowl of cream on the dining table. The general lack of generosity towards others, different from oneself, which Jonathan Swift regards as so characteristic of human beings, of the human society or human nature, is graphically illustrated by the reaction of the king of this kingdom to Gulliver's tales of the culture of his native country, that is England. And there are a few lines which are worthy of quote, and I'm quoting the lines so that we can understand what it actually means to be in the midst of a huge cultural difference between the two. Swift says, and I quote, "Then, turning to his first minister, he observed how contemptible a thing was human grandeur, which could be mimicked by such diminutive insects as I. And yet, said he, I dare engage. These creatures have their titles and distinctions of honor. They contrive little nests and burrows that they call houses and cities. They make a figure in dress and equipage. They love, they fight, they dispute, they cheat, they betray." Unquote. Gulliver bridles at the patronizing air with which these words are delivered, although it is not at all that different from his own understanding or own attitude towards the Lilliputians in the earlier chapter, among whom he wandered, inspecting their customs almost as if uh, they were virtual non-entities or they were laboratory experiments set up for his benefit. The idea that each society might actually learn from the other, irrespective of obvious differences in terms of physicality, is signally missing both in Book 1 and in Book 2 of Gulliver's Travels. Other races are usually considered as no more than mere curiosity. It is, however, to the Brobdingnagians' credit that their king is so horrified at Gulliver's description of the gunpowder and the destructive impact that the use of gunpowder normally has, as Gulliver describes, that he indignantly refuses to Gulliver's offer to introduce it into his kingdom as a weapon to be used even against his enemies. Swift's satire is at least as much at Gulliver's expense at such points, with his indignation to hear our noble country contemptuously treated, unquote, revealing his own sense of clearly misplaced cultural superiority. But the underlying point about the pretensions of human beings strikes home very forcefully, nevertheless, in this particular book. Such pretensions make it all but impossible that different cultures can ever live, according to Swift, together in harmony and in mutual understanding and respect. And indeed, the only beings with which Gulliver feels such an idyllic connection, as it were, or idyllic existence, would be possible to turn out to the non-human Yoinians much later in this novel, who hardly treat Gulliver as their equal. In fact, one critic has put it that what distinguishes Gulliver from the homonyms is their quote-unquote unpleasant coldness and self-satisfaction, and Gulliver is to be criticized for his own exaggerated devotion to them. Be that as it may, so far as this particular book is concerned, it's apparently clear that Swift wants us to understand that human beings of whatever shape or size are naturally and apparently not well disposed towards each other, particularly when cultural differences come on the scene. In fact, they have the greatest difficulty in making the leap of imagination or leap of courage, as some would say, required to see life from the other end, from the other cultural perspective than their own. They betray a distinct tendency to patronize each other, to put each other down and establish their own superiority, cultural superiority, when faced with radically different lifestyles. So effectively, this particular book, vis-a-vis its attitude to multiculturalism, is definitely a book that is worth studying because it reveals to a great extent what Swift meant when he puts Gulliver in a position of distinct inferiority, at least in terms of physicality, and even morally so, when he feels that his pride in declaring the impact of the gunpowder would be dismissed by the king as something that he would not use even on his enemies. So, even at a moral level, the ability of human beings to be destructive to one another is contemptuously dismissed by the host king. And even Gulliver is threatened with some form of severe punishment for trying to put this particular idea again about the impact of gunpowder or the introduction of gunpowder in this society. So essentially, Gulliver's cultural chauvinism, which was so very apparent to readers in the earlier book, somehow stands chastened, and it is chastened to a significant degree. And the obvious helplessness of Gulliver at the end of this particular book, a helplessness that is caused by the fact that he is unable to escape, uh, is heightened further by the fact that Swift had ultimately had to take recourse to what some would call a Hardian style of a coincidence of an eagle, a giant eagle, happening to pick up the box in which Gulliver was traveling, flying away with the box and dropping the box into the sea. So it is as if fate is working hard to deliver Gulliver from a situation where he is both physically a diminutive and morally a diminutive as well. And just from that viewpoint, we can clearly say that Jonathan Swift's satirical force in Book 2 rests significantly on the ability of Gulliver to stand up as a member of the errant human species which is ridiculed, uh, satirized, and put down to scrutiny by Jonathan Swift. So, what we have in book 2 is actually, in some sense, almost a reverse of perspectives of what we saw in book 1 from the point of view of Gulliver. And to that extent, we can tell that both as Gulliver a giant in Lilliput and Gulliver as a diminutive midget in Brobdingnag are both two perspectives of a common human inability to adjust to different cultural traits or even physical traits, or cultural traits which are outcomes of physical traits. And we can even say that what was true in Swift's time may be equally true or even more true than Swift's time in today's time in contexts. So this roughly is the idea that I wanted to give you with regard to book 2 of Gulliver's Travels. Now obviously when you go through the text, you will be in a position to form your own opinions or significances, specifically in contemporary contexts, with regard to both books 1 and book 2. Thank you.